My name is Laurie Paris, and welcome to She Life. My mother, Catherine Smith Gatormson, whose mother is Catherine Victoria Smith, whose mother is Nancy Smith, whose mother is Marion Mackenzie, named me Laurie Jean. I knew only two of these four women, but I carry their blood in my veins and their memories in my bones. May I speak our collective truth in a way that makes good change in a world that needs great change. The time has come for you and I to take our rightful sacred place in a culture that denies it. This is my story and journey to uncover the truth that supports my right to do just that, no matter the cost. I hope you decide you deserve that sacred place too. Episode 9, Rennes-le-Château and a Mother Crucified. My mother, Catherine, spelt with a C, turned 90 this year. Born the oldest of fraternal twins on May 24th, 1933, she at 9:20 p.m. and her sister at 9:40 were a birthday present for their mother, Catherine, spelt with a K. All three women born on May 24th, the birthday of a queen named Victoria, who was born on that same spring day in 1819, my grandmother in 1915. Being born the same day of the queen did not go unnoticed in our family and gave the twins and their mother exalted status. My great-grandmother would never see her daughter grow up and give birth, having died from the undiagnosed effects of diabetes on the platform of the Canadian National Railway station in Winnipeg after traveling by train from her small community to see a doctor. The women were all born under the star of Gemini, the Latin name for twins that are identified as the constellations Castor and Pollux, one mortal, the other immortal. The twins also had a sister 3 years their junior named Gail, born in 1936 at 3:30 a.m., very close to the time of my birth 21 years later at 3:33 a.m. They were three of the many children whose fathers fought in World War II between September 1st, 1939 and September 2nd, 1945. Their children learning to bear the hardships of war, dependent on their mother's strength and fortitude to keep them safe and occupied until their father returned home to help. The twins were 6 when the war began and 12 when it ended. Their father would return to them from war, but not stay, as his wife, my grandmother, had found love while he was away. The Hortus Delicarum, translated as Garden of Delights, is an illuminated medieval manuscript written over many years by Herod of Landsberg, a nun who would eventually become the Mother Superior of Hohenberg Abbey, an abbey that sits on top of Mont Saint-Odile in France. Herod was born at Landsberg Castle sometime between 1125 and 1130 and died on July 25th, 1195, after leading the nuns of the abbey for 28 years. In an effort to educate the women in her care, she wrote this manuscript that was more of an encyclopedia that included commentary on scripture, astronomy, philosophy, Latin poems with musical accompaniment, natural history, and the history of humankind. According to Anne's Story, a professor of art history at Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington, in an article titled A Theophany of the Feminine, published in the Woman's Art Journal in 1998, the Hortus Delicarum was considered one of the more brilliant achievements of 12th century art, and her interpretation of the woman of the apocalypse that she illustrated in her work titled Woman Clothed with a Sun emphasized the power of the female gender. In Herod's drawing, Mary is giving her son Jesus to the angels for safekeeping, ignoring the menacing dragons on either side, while sporting her most prominent feature, a pair of enormous wings. Herod lived and worked just before the Gregorian reforms that set out to restore religious discipline within the Catholic Church, and according to story, reduce the status and freedom of abbesses and other women in ecclesiastical life. But until the reforms took hold, story says, Herod and others were able to work within the established institutions and iconography of the Church to find ways to amend them to emphasize a more egalitarian message of spirituality and power. And although they encountered obstacles, they benefited from the example of powerful women who acted as their advisors. Another illustration included in the Hortus Delicarum was Herod's rendition of the tree of Jesse, the line of descendants in the book of Isaiah, beginning with Jesse, the father of King David, the most famous king of Israel, and ending with Jesus. The name Jesse means king or God's gift, and Christians believed King Jesse died without sin, or as Buddhists would say, died enlightened. The tree of Jesse is often replicated through art in medieval hymn books, on stained glass windows, around portals, walls, and ceilings of medieval churches, and in smaller works such as tapestries and embroidery. During medieval times, the symbol of the tree was adopted by nobility as a symbol of their family lineage. Today it is known as the family tree. The tree of Jesse, illustrated by the Catholic nun Herod within the Hortus Delicarum, was not for public view. This encyclopedia, with its illustrations, was only for the nuns of Hohenberg Abbey and is quite different from other depictions of the line of King Jesse and King David, the patriarchs of Jesus' family tree. Herod's illustration features a large serpent fish in place of Jesse, with Jesus fishing his ancestors out of the mouth of this serpent fish as opposed to the side of Jesse's body. The serpent fish has wings, a curled tail, 2 paws instead of fins, and 2 horns upon its head, and is said to be Leviathan, the primordial sea serpent. Odo of Cluny, a venerated Catholic saint, was born near the end of the 9th century in France and was the second abbot of Cluny, who as a child was sent to the court of his patron, the Count of Anjou, by the brothers of the monastery his parents had initially entrusted him to. Odo was devoted to Saint Martin, the 3rd Bishop of Tours, who was the patron saint of Guise and the Pontifical Swiss Guard of the Vatican. He was also devoted to the Mother of Jesus, and throughout his life addressed her always as the Mother of Mercy. Odo speaks to the capture of Leviathan, as portrayed in the biblical tree of Jesse, and says that the line of this hook is the genealogy of Christ up to the Virgin Mary. And the 12th century Christian theologian Honorius of Autun adds to the explanation in the Speculum Ecclesiae, saying, Leviathan, the monster who swam in the sea of the world, is Satan. God threw the line, which is the human descent of Christ, into the sea. The bait was Christ. Herod's tree of Jesse shows the hook of the fishing rod Jesus has cast, firmly implanted in the sea serpent's lower jaw. On the line of this rod are his 7 bearded male ancestors, and at the bottom, closest to the mouth of the serpent, is the bait described by Saint Odo, Jesus' 8th ancestor, his mother crucified. My Rennes-le-Château journey and upcoming book, Mother Crucified, Unveiling the True Secret of Rennes-le-Château, can be best described as my red book, a reference to the book of the Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst Carl Jung that was based on journals he kept between 1913 to 1917, an exploration of his dreams and daydream fantasies that he chose to write about but not publish in his lifetime. Jung described his red book as a confrontation with the unconscious of his dreams, the same phenomena that occurred to me when I happened upon the mystery of Rennes-le-Château and the opera star of the Belle Époque, Emma Calvé. The mystery took me into a world that Jung said deliberately evoked a fantasy in a waking state, and then entering into it as into a drama. And I will admit, as Jung did about his red book, that to the superficial observer, it will appear like madness. As shared in the introduction to the She Life podcast, I had two significant dreams that set me on a quest that serendipitously led to the mystery of Rennes-le-Château. The dream of the woman who crashed to earth after being smashed on a steel anvil to tell me that the world was an experiment gone wrong, and the dream in the early morning hours of May 2008, where I saw a woman crucified on an old wooden cross that had been discarded in the desert and warned by the devil who had been watching me not to tell anyone what I had seen, or he would burn my house down. Jung believed dreams, including mine, were the psyche's way of conveying important messages and put great value on them. He writes in his Red Book, "I must learn that the dregs of my thought, my dreams are the speech of my soul. I must carry them in my heart and go back and forth over them in my mind, like the words of the person dearest to me. Dreams are the guiding words of the soul." I am fully aware that these two dreams are metaphors of my personal journey in life, and to obtain a better understanding, I researched the symbolism of them in books and online resources. To my good fortune, a new tool called ChatGPT, a language chat box developed by OpenAI, was launched on November 30th, 2022, and a good friend insisted on giving me a seminar on this new tool that he was now using in his business consulting practice. My friend was using ChatGPT to help him develop content and believed it could help me in organizing my book when the time came to finish writing it. OpenAI describes chat on its website as interacting in a conversational way in dialogue format that makes it possible to answer follow-up questions, challenge incorrect premises, and reject inappropriate requests, which it did when I asked it to find the metaphors of my dreams from the devil's perspective. But it did converse with me when I asked for a Gnostic metaphorical dream analysis. Here's what Chat had to say about my dream of the woman crucified on the cross. The life-size wooden cross with the broken-legged woman in the passage could be seen as a symbol of the oppressive and repressive nature of mainstream religion and society. The fact that the woman on the cross is not Jesus, but an unknown woman with a broken leg, could represent the idea that the experiences and struggles of marginalized and oppressed people are ignored or erased by mainstream religion. The barren landscape in which the cross is found could represent the emptiness and hopelessness of a life dominated by traditional religion and societal norms. The devil's threat to burn down the dreamer's house if they share the story could represent the fear that speaking out against oppressive systems of power can bring retribution from those in power. Overall, this passage could be seen as a symbol of the rejection of traditional religious authority and the embrace of individuality, personal freedom, and empowerment. The broken leg of the woman on the cross could represent the wounds and struggles of those who have been oppressed by religious or societal systems, and the need to break free from those systems in order to live a fulfilling and authentic life. I also asked about the dream of the bare-chested woman who crashed to earth after being smashed on the large steel anvil to share with me that the world we inhabited was an experiment gone wrong. Chat replied, "The dream's imagery carries metaphorical layers that convey profound insights. The woman descending from the sky symbolizes an idea or concept brought down to earth, representing a revelation or message from a higher realm. Her continuous smashing on a steel anvil reflects the harshness of reality and challenges such concepts face when confronted with the practical world. This illustrates the difficulty of implementing transformative ideas amidst real-world obstacles. Her urgent message, framed as an experiment gone wrong, serves as a metaphor for the state of Earth, hinting at a divergence from its intended path and suggesting your concern for the world's current state and showcasing your quest for a more profound understanding of the world's complexities. I now had a good grasp of the metaphors of these dreams, but I still believed there was more to decipher, and so with the revelation from a higher realm, I was now literally searching the world, looking for clues and proof of an experiment upon the earth that had gone wrong, and a woman crucified. And to my surprise, I found both. Many have left the mystery of Rennes-le-Château for dead, but as you can see, I am not one of them. I am still intrigued and bear a strong belief that the true nature of the secret that lay hidden within the mystery has not yet been revealed in its full capacity. As I began my quest, I quickly found myself immersed and sometimes drowning in all the fact, fiction, and speculation concerning the mystery of Rennes-le-Château, and found that Emma Calvé, although mentioned, was never given the recognition she deserved. I eventually made a trip to Europe to visit Rennes-le-Château and Calvé's grave in Millau, and then traveled to Scotland to investigate Rosslyn Chapel, the church where the body of Mary Magdalene is entombed, according to Dan Brown's book, The Da Vinci Code. I also don't believe that the burgeoning Gnostic movement of the Belle Époque in France has been fully explored, and the roles played by Emma Calvé and the other women involved have been fully integrated, including the role of Marie de Hautpoul, whose tomb is an important link in the chain of events in the mystery. Tobias Churton, an expert in Gnostic religions, is one of the few scholars who has dared comment on the mystery of Rennes-le-Château, and says in chapter 18 of his book, The Invisibles, The True History of the Rosicrucians, published in 2009, explains his hesitation to write about the mystery as a reputable scholar because of its slippery nature. He says, "It is an area full of pitfalls to trap the unwary. For sure, a crazy, surrealist, even sinister but oddly suggestive mélange of fact, speculation, distortion, and downright lies." He is absolutely correct, and I have kept this in mind as I wrote these 9 podcasts, and will keep it top of mind when writing what I believe to be the true secret of the mystery of Rennes-le-Château and the Mother Crucified. When I visited the village, I had several years of researching under my belt, and it had been 8 months since sharing with Andrew Goff that I believed I was the reincarnation of Emma Calvé. I arrived in the spring of 2008 and eventually found my way to the church that was once the private chapel of Marie de Hautpoul, where I was immediately greeted at the door by a devil carved of stone, a devil referred to as Asmodeus by author Gerard de Sade in his book The Accursed Treasure of Rennes-le-Château, published in 1967. Asmodeus is considered the worst of demons, and according to the Testament of Solomon, a text attributed to King Solomon himself, was born of a human mother and an angel father. I decided to approach the statue of Asmodeus, known as the King of the World to the Cathars, and touch his hand to pay my respect and acknowledge his presence and his early morning mourning to me. I knew I was no match for him and was now on his land, inside his pentacle, thousands of miles away from my home. The cold stone hand I touched sat perched on his knee, the same knee of the same leg that had been broken off of the plaster woman crucified on the old worn wooden cross in my dream. Looking at his bulging eyes that stared at the black and white tiled floor below our feet, I told the devil that I could not keep his secret. I then lifted my hand from his and walked into the ancient Catholic church and secret of the famous deceased and defrocked priest Saunière. I was perhaps 12 years old when we took a trip to visit my mother's father, who was living in British Columbia managing a summer resort. It was the only time I remember meeting him. The resort had cabins and trailers and a small grocery store for guests' needs. It was my first introduction to retail sales and I became completely enamored with the whole process. My grandfather allowed me to help in the store during the week we stayed with him, and within days I was operating the till and helping customers with their purchases. My entrepreneurial career had begun. My mother's love for her father had never faded and was on full display for everyone to see, her childlike affection full of hugs and giggles. A man who would hand his store to my younger self did not know how to deal with this grown woman, so full of love for him, a woman who would never get over the heartbreak of a father still lost to her from choices made during war. I have prayed and fasted about our plight as women and shared on this podcast that I believe one of the biggest culprits of female distress is the Roman Catholic Church. I have found that this church with its clergy is the breeding ground of racial superiority, where crimes against humanity have existed for centuries, and the indoctrination of children into a foundational belief that all of us are born broken and sinful, that women are not worthy, that the Indigenous are disposable, and all other beliefs are evil and inferior to theirs. Hundreds of years ago, the Church took it upon themselves to boldly assert that their Pope and priests were the representatives of Jesus Christ on earth, the only legitimate heirs to the words of his ministry through an unbroken line of disciples, beginning with the Apostle Peter. I don't believe for a moment that Jesus would ever have given permission to his heirs to kill the Cathars of France in the 13th century, execute witches or women of the earth between 1450 to 1750, and sexually molest 12,000 children in the United States, molestations that were painstakingly exposed by the Boston Globe's Spotlight team of investigative journalists. James Carroll, a former priest and author of the book The Truth at the Heart of the Lie, How the Catholic Church Lost Its Soul, wrote an article titled Abolish the Priesthood that made the cover of the June 2019 issue of The Atlantic, a well-respected American magazine written and distributed since 1857, and according to their website, has a 165-year tradition of challenging assumptions and pursuing truth. In the article, Carroll writes, not long before the Boston Globe began publishing its series on predator priests in 2002, the Spotlight series that became a movie of the same name, the government of Ireland established a commission, ultimately chaired by Judge Sean Ryan, to investigate accounts and rumors of child abuse in Ireland's residential institutions for children, nearly all of which were run by the Catholic Church. The Ryan Commission published its 2,600-page report in 2009, and despite government inspections and supervision, the Catholic clergy had, across decades, violently tormented thousands of children. The report found that children held in orphanages and reformatory schools were treated no better than slaves, in some cases, sex slaves. Rape and molestation of boys were endemic. Other reports were issued about other institutions, including parish churches and schools, and homes for unwed mothers, the notorious Magdalene laundries, where girls and women were condemned to lives of coercive servitude. As I head off to finish writing Mother Crucified, I want to leave you with the words of Irish professor, writer, theorist, and activist Dr. Mary Condren from her book, The Serpent and the Goddess, Women, Religion, and Power in Celtic Ireland, first published in 1989 and then again in 2002. A book I ordered online many years ago that mysteriously saw 3 copies delivered to my door. Somebody or something wanted me to take notice of this book. History has provided the forum wherein men have safeguarded their arena of political and religious power, but the sacred space of male history has often been carved out, literally, over the bodies of women. Using the language of tradition, precedent, and even divine will, men in many cultures have appealed to or established a mythical or sacred past to justify social dominance in the present. Now, the emerging consciousness of women represents a fundamental challenge to the gods of Western culture. Far from not wanting to have anything to do with religion, a position adopted by some feminists, the voices of women call for a renewed religious consciousness. We must undergo a profound conversion to a spirituality and worldview that honors womanhood and empowers our being, one that reveres the earth upon which all our foundations rest. Such a conversion will require a radical leap of faith into the unknown. We will often confront the ghosts and demons of the past, and all we will have to sustain us will be the barest hope and possibility that our efforts will succeed. Far from knocking at the door of patriarchy to get in, we need to overthrow the patriarchal gods of displaced responsibility, together with their warriors and priests, if our world is to survive. It's time. You must feel it. I certainly do. I have watched and waited and expected to see change since I was 8 years old that would put into place and practice laws and a culture protecting women and their children. This has not happened. In a world that considers itself modern, where women believe they are more liberated than perhaps they truly are, I watch young people overdose daily from opioid addiction from the window of my retail shop in a city known as the murder capital of Canada. I have an unrelenting fear that if I do not find the courage and time to focus on the cause of putting women back in their sacred role, the world I've had the honor to live in will not survive. The war, as described by Condren, to overthrow the patriarchal gods of displaced responsibility is needed, and I choose to fight with words of war that I hope will end the plight of women in my lifetime. May it be so.